What if the person you trusted most was systematically deleting evidence while you slept? What if their calm cooperation with police was actually the most calculated deception you'd ever witnessed? And what if two innocent children paid the ultimate price for someone's desperate attempt to hide the truth? Have you ever wondered how well you really know your partner, your family members? In our hyper-connected world, we share our lives, our secrets, our most intimate moments with those closest to us. We hand them our phones, share our passwords, trust them with our digital souls. But what happens when that trust becomes a weapon? Today, I'm taking you inside one of the most chilling cases of digital deception and family betrayal to emerge from Nova Scotia. A case where deleted text messages, mysterious financial transactions, and a fragment of a little girl's blanket would unravel a web of lies so complex it would change how investigators approach family disappearances forever. This is the story of 6-year-old Lilly Sullivan and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan, two children whose innocent faces would become the center of a digital forensics nightmare that exposed the dark truth about modern deception. Their stepfather, Daniel Martel, appeared to be the model of cooperation. Their mother, Malehya Brooks Murray, seemed devastated by their disappearance. But beneath the surface, digital investigators were uncovering something far more sinister. Before we dive into this case, I need you to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Cases like this require months of research, and your support helps me bring you these deep investigations that mainstream media won't touch. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand why digital evidence never lies, even when the people around you do. Because here's the life lesson we're going to explore today. In our digital age, your phone, your computer, your financial records, they're all creating an unalterable timeline of your life. And when tragedy strikes, those digital footprints will either save you or destroy you. There's no middle ground. The Sullivan case isn't just about two missing children, though their story will break your heart. It's about how technology has fundamentally changed the nature of deception, how the very tools we use to stay connected can become instruments of the most sophisticated cover-ups imaginable. What investigators discovered in Daniel Martel's digital footprint would challenge everything they thought they knew about cooperative witnesses. What they found in the recovered evidence would suggest that sometimes the person trying hardest to help you is actually the one with the most to hide. So buckle up, because we're about to dive into a case where every deleted message, every suspicious transaction, every recovered digital fragment tells a story that the human tongue could never speak. This is the story of how modern technology exposed a cover-up so elaborate, so carefully planned, that it took cutting-edge digital forensics to unveil the truth. And at the center of it all, two beautiful children whose fate may have been sealed not by chance but by the digital deceptions of the people who were supposed to protect them. To understand how this tragedy unfolded, we need to travel to rural Nova Scotia, to a place where the stunning natural beauty masks the inherent dangers of isolation. Lansdowne Station isn't just remote, it's the kind of place where your nearest neighbor might be miles away, where help isn't just a phone call away, and where secrets can stay buried as deep as the maritime forests that surround every home. Gallock Road, where the Sullivan family lived, perfectly embodied this double-edged sword of rural life. Dense woodlands stretched in every direction, creating a natural barrier that offered privacy and tranquility, but also the perfect cover for activities you wouldn't want the world to see. The challenging terrain that made the area beautiful would later complicate search efforts and fuel the suspicions that would consume this case. This was the world that 6-year-old Lilly and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan called home. Like many children in rural communities, they were growing up surrounded by nature's code playground, endless forests to explore, streams to splash in, and the kind of freedom that city kids only dream about. But that same freedom, that same isolation, would become central to the mystery that would grip an entire nation. Living with them were their mother, Malehya Brooks Murray, and their stepfather, Daniel Martel. On the surface, this appeared to be a blended family making it work in challenging circumstances. Daniel, born in Halifax in 1982, had built a reputation as methodical and reliable, the kind of man you'd want in a crisis. His business background demanded discretion and professionalism, qualities that initially made him appear like the stabilizing force the family needed. But here's where our first life lesson emerges. Isolation can hide warning signs in plain sight. When families live far from community oversight, when there are no neighbors watching, no regular visitors dropping by, it becomes much easier for problems to escalate without detection. And there were problems. Long before Lily and Jack disappeared, child welfare agencies had already taken notice of the Sullivan household. School officials had raised concerns about the children's developmental progress. Social services had launched investigations into the family's living conditions. The results of these investigations were never fully disclosed, but they left a paper trail of concern, a trail that would later seem prophetic. Malehya herself was a complex figure. Born in Truro in 1987, she had faced her own struggles with what those close to her described as periods of instability. Friends and family noticed that she would sometimes retreat from social interactions, becoming increasingly dependent on Daniel's support or what some observers would later describe as his control. The relationship between Daniel and Malehya was intense and interdependent in ways that made their social circle uncomfortable. While Daniel was seen as the steady influence, several people noticed that Malehya's decisions often leaned towards secrecy, especially when it came to personal finances and communication with the outside world. Female mentors in the community had tried to maintain contact with Malehya, but they described a woman under increasing pressure. Financial difficulties, health concerns, and the isolation of rural living had created a pressure cooker situation. Some community members later admitted they sensed trouble brewing, but the culture of privacy that protects rural communities can also prevent people from getting the help they need. What's particularly chilling is how this isolation allowed concerning behaviors to develop and escalate without outside intervention. In urban settings, children interact with multiple adults daily: teachers, neighbors, family friends, community members. These interactions create natural checkpoints where concerning changes in behavior or welfare might be noticed and addressed. But on Garlock Road, the Sullivan household was largely self-contained. The children's primary interactions were with Daniel and Malehya. Their developmental concerns, their living conditions, their daily experiences were filtered through these two adults. When child welfare did become involved, they were dealing with a family unit where the adults controlled virtually all information flowing in and out. This dynamic is crucial to understanding what would happen next. In isolated families, power imbalances can become extreme. The person who controls communication, finances, and access to the outside world holds enormous power over other family members. When that power is used to hide problems rather than solve them, the consequences can be devastating. Community members would later recall subtle signs that something wasn't right. Daniel's insistence on absolute control over his personal affairs, Malehya's increasing withdrawal from social connections, the children's limited interactions with other adults outside the home. But here's the tragic reality. In our culture, we're taught to respect family privacy. We don't want to be nosy neighbors or interfering busybodies. This respect for privacy is generally healthy, but it can also create blind spots where abuse, neglect, or other serious problems can flourish unchecked. The Sullivan case teaches us that community vigilance isn't about being intrusive, it's about being observant and caring enough to notice when something seems wrong. It's about creating networks of support that make it harder for families to become dangerously isolated. As we'll see, the very isolation that initially seemed to protect the Sullivan family's privacy would later make it nearly impossible to determine what really happened on that fateful day in May. The same remote location that offered peace and quiet would become the setting for a mystery that would expose the dark side of digital age deception. Because when tragedy struck this isolated family, the only witnesses would be the digital devices that recorded every call, every message, every transaction, devices that would ultimately reveal a truth far more complex and disturbing than anyone initially imagined. The morning of May 2, 2025, began like any other in the Sullivan household. By all accounts, the routine was normal. Lilly was seen moving about the house. Jack's presence was noted in the kitchen. These were the kinds of ordinary moments that families never imagine will become evidence in a criminal investigation, never think will be analyzed and dissected by digital forensics experts looking for clues. But normalcy can be deceptive. As investigators would later discover, the most dangerous deceptions often hide behind the most ordinary facades. At approximately 10:00 a.m., That ordinary morning exploded into chaos when Malehya Brooks Murray contacted emergency services with words that would haunt a community. The children were missing. Her explanation seemed simple enough. The sliding back door had been left ajar, allowing the children to venture outdoors into the vast wilderness surrounding their home. In those first moments, as the 911 call crackled through emergency dispatch systems, nobody questioned the story. It made sense. Rural children explore, sliding doors get left open. In the dense forests of Nova Scotia, 2 small children could easily become lost or disoriented. The immediate response was swift and appropriate. Treat this as a vulnerable missing persons case and mobilize every available resource. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police responded with the urgency the situation demanded. Within hours, a massive search operation was underway. This wasn't just a local response. This was the kind of all-hands-on-deck effort reserved for the most serious cases involving missing children. Ground teams began systematically combing through the dense woodlands surrounding the Sullivan property. Drone surveillance units took to the skies, their thermal imaging cameras scanning for any sign of heat signatures that might indicate the children's location. Helicopters thundered overhead, their search patterns covering mile after mile of unforgiving terrain. But perhaps most significantly, specialized underwater units were deployed. This detail is crucial because it reveals something about the investigators' mindset from the very beginning. They weren't just looking for children who had wandered off. They were preparing for the possibility of a much more serious outcome. A vulnerable missing persons advisory was issued immediately. Lilly and Jack's photos were distributed across media networks throughout Nova Scotia and beyond. The images showed 2 beautiful children, Lilly with her bright eyes and sweet smile, Jack with the innocent expression that only 4-year-olds possess. These weren't just missing persons photos, they were a community's desperate plea for help. And here's where I need to pause and ask you something important. Have you ever experienced that moment when a community comes together in crisis, when strangers become searchers, when everyone drops everything to help find someone else's children? Drop a comment below if you've ever been part of a community search effort, because what happened next in Nova Scotia shows both the best and worst of human nature. The response from the community was overwhelming. Volunteers poured in from across the region, many of them parents themselves, who couldn't bear the thought of children lost in the wilderness. These weren't trained search and rescue personnel. They were neighbors, friends, complete strangers who felt compelled to help. But as the hours turned into days, something began to feel wrong to experienced investigators. The story was too clean, too simple. In cases involving missing children, there are usually more variables, more chaos, more conflicting accounts from witnesses. The sliding door narrative, while plausible, left too many questions unanswered. Where exactly had the children gone? Why hadn't their absence been noticed sooner? In a household with 2 adults, how did 2 small children simply vanish without anyone hearing the door open or noticing their absence? More troubling were the responses from Daniel and Malehya during those first crucial interviews. Experienced investigators know that people in crisis often provide inconsistent information. Trauma affects memory. Panic creates confusion. But there's a difference between trauma-induced inconsistency and carefully constructed responses. Daniel, in particular, struck investigators as unusually composed, while Malehya appeared distraught, as any mother would be. Daniel's responses were measured, precise, almost rehearsed. He answered questions with the kind of methodical precision that investigators found both helpful and suspicious. Even more concerning were the gaps in the timeline that began to emerge during these initial interviews. Daniel claimed he could not recall certain details about his whereabouts during key moments of the morning. For someone with his reputation for methodical precision, these memory lapses seemed inconsistent with his usual behavior patterns. The physical evidence from that first day was frustratingly sparse. No clear footprints leading away from the house. No signs of struggle or disturbance. No obvious path the children might have taken into the woods. It was as if 2 children had simply vanished into thin air, which, as any investigator will tell you, almost never happens in real missing persons cases. As the search teams expanded their efforts, covering wider and wider areas around the Sullivan property, the lack of any concrete leads became increasingly troubling. These weren't teenagers who might run away or hide deliberately. These were very young children, who would likely call out if they heard searchers, who would probably seek help if they were lost and scared. The dogs brought in for the search were particularly puzzling. Scent tracking dogs are remarkably effective at following human trails, especially fresh ones, but the dogs seemed confused, unable to establish a clear scent trail leading away from the property. This could mean several things, none of them good. By the end of that first day, as darkness fell over the Nova Scotia wilderness, the terrible reality was beginning to set in. Despite massive search efforts, despite community volunteers, despite advanced technology and specialized equipment, there was no sign of Lilly and Jack Sullivan. The investigation that had begun as a straightforward missing children case was already starting to feel like something much more complex and disturbing. The digital forensics teams that would later uncover the shocking truth about Daniel Martel's deception were already being quietly assembled. Because even on that first day, investigators had begun to suspect that the sliding door story might not be the whole truth. They just didn't know yet how deep the deception really went. Over the next 5 days, Nova Scotia witnessed one of the most extensive search operations in the province's history. What unfolded wasn't just a rescue mission. It was a community's desperate attempt to bring 2 innocent children home, and a law enforcement operation that would reveal disturbing patterns of behavior from those closest to the missing children. The scale of the operation was staggering. Over 160 searchers participated, creating a small army of dedicated individuals who refused to give up hope. These weren't just professional search and rescue teams. They were farmers, teachers, retirees, parents, and young adults who had never met Lilly and Jack Sullivan, but couldn't bear the thought of children lost in the wilderness. The search teams employed every tool available to modern rescue operations. Thermal imaging equipment scanned the forest floor for heat signatures. Ground-penetrating radar examined areas where the children might have fallen or become trapped. Search dogs from multiple agencies were brought in, their sensitive noses trained to detect human scent even days after someone had passed through an area. But perhaps most impressive was the volunteer coordination. Local churches and community centers became staging areas. Volunteers organized themselves into grid search patterns, ensuring that every square foot of potential search area was systematically examined. Hot meals were prepared for searchers. Communication networks were established to coordinate between different teams. This was community response at its finest, except for one troubling detail that investigators couldn't ignore. Daniel Martel's behavior during these search efforts struck experienced officers as unusual. While most family members in similar situations are either paralyzed by grief or frantically participating in search efforts, Daniel maintained an almost professional detachment. He was cooperative, certainly. He answered questions thoroughly. He provided information when requested. But his emotional responses seemed calibrated rather than spontaneous. Investigators noted that he would display appropriate concern when directly questioned, but would return to an almost businesslike demeanor when he thought no one was watching. This isn't necessarily indicative of guilt. People respond to trauma differently, but it was notable enough to catch the attention of behavioral analysts. More concerning were the subtle inconsistencies that began emerging in Daniel's account of that morning. During one interview, he mentioned checking the children's room at 9:30 a.m. In another interview, he said he hadn't checked on them until after Malehya discovered they were missing. These might seem like minor discrepancies, but in missing children cases, timing is everything. On May 7, the official search was scaled back. After 5 days of intensive effort, covering hundreds of acres of challenging terrain, investigators reluctantly acknowledged that they had found no definitive signs of the children's whereabouts. The thermal imaging had detected no heat sources. The dogs had failed to establish any clear scent trails. The ground teams had discovered no physical evidence of the children's passage. This decision to scale back the search was devastating for the community, but necessary from a resource management perspective. The reality is that search and rescue operations can't continue indefinitely without concrete leads. But the decision also marked a crucial shift in the investigation's focus. If Lilly and Jack hadn't simply wandered into the woods and become lost, then what had happened to them? This question would drive the next phase of the investigation, a phase that would focus much more intensively on the family dynamics and the digital evidence that was quietly being collected. But the community wasn't ready to give up. Public pressure mounted for renewed search efforts. Social media campaigns kept the children's faces in the public eye. Local media coverage remained intense. The $50,000 reward announced by the Nova Scotia government drew national attention to the case. This public pressure led to the renewed search effort that began on May 18. This second phase of searching was more targeted, focusing on areas that previous operations hadn't fully explored. Search teams examined obscure woodland paths, stream banks, and remote areas that might have been overlooked during the initial massive effort. Investigators also expanded their review of dashcam footage from vehicles traveling along Gairloch Road. This was painstaking work. Hours of video footage had to be analyzed frame by frame, looking for any sign of the children or any unusual activity that might be connected to their disappearance. Here's a question I want you to consider. In your community, would volunteers turn out like this for missing children? Would strangers dedicate days of their lives to searching for kids they'd never met? Let me know in the comments, because community response in cases like this often reflects deeper values about how we protect our most vulnerable members. But even this renewed search effort yielded no concrete results. The absence of any physical evidence was becoming increasingly puzzling to investigators. In most missing children cases, there are traces, footprints, clothing fibers, disturbed vegetation, something that indicates the children's movement through an area. The complete absence of such evidence began to suggest alternative scenarios. Had the children actually left the house on foot? If they had been taken from the property by vehicle, that would explain the lack of scent trails and footprints leading into the woods. This possibility shifted investigative focus toward the adults in the household and their activities during the crucial time period. If the children hadn't walked away from the house, then someone must have transported them, and the people with the best access and opportunity were Daniel and Malehya. As the second search effort concluded without success, investigators began to piece together a more sophisticated analysis of the digital evidence that had been quietly collected throughout the search period. Phone records, financial transactions, vehicle movement data, social media activity. All of this information was being analyzed to create a comprehensive timeline of the adults' activities. What they would discover in this digital analysis would fundamentally change the nature of the investigation. The cooperative stepfather and distraught mother were about to be revealed as something far more complex and troubling. The search for Lilly and Jack Sullivan wasn't over. It was about to take a dramatic turn into the world of digital forensics, where deleted messages and hidden transactions would tell a story that no amount of searching the forests could have revealed. 3 months into the investigation, as the physical searches had yielded no concrete leads, investigators made a decision that would revolutionize the entire case. They would subject Daniel Martel's digital devices to the most sophisticated forensic analysis available to Canadian law enforcement. What they discovered would change everything. Modern digital forensics isn't just about recovering deleted files. It's about reconstructing the complete digital life of a device. Every call, every text, every app interaction, every financial transaction, every location ping creates a digital fingerprint that can be analyzed, cross-referenced, and timeline mapped with extraordinary precision. When forensic analysts first examined Daniel's mobile device, they initially found what appeared to be the phone records of a cooperative witness. His call logs showed appropriate contact with law enforcement, family members, and search coordinators. His text messages appeared to document his participation in search efforts and his communication with concerned community members. But digital forensic specialists know that the surface level of device data tells only part of the story. Using advanced recovery techniques, they began reconstructing the deleted data from Daniel's device. And what they found was shocking. The systematic deletion of communications wasn't random or accidental. It followed a specific pattern, targeting particular time periods and specific contacts. Most significantly, many of the deleted messages were communications with a phone number that investigators eventually traced to a close associate of Malehya Brooks Murray. Here's where the sophistication of this potential deception becomes clear. Daniel hadn't simply deleted all his communications in a panic. He had selectively removed specific conversations while leaving others intact. This level of deliberate curation suggested someone with enough technical knowledge to understand how digital forensics works and enough presence of mind to attempt to manipulate the evidence trail. The recovered messages, when reconstructed, revealed a series of communications that painted a very different picture of Daniel's activities during the crucial time period. While his preserved messages showed appropriate concern and cooperation, the deleted communications suggested a level of coordination and planning that was deeply troubling. This brings us to a crucial life lesson that everyone in the digital age needs to understand. Your digital footprint is virtually impossible to completely erase. Even when you think you've deleted something permanently, forensic specialists can often recover it. Your phone stores data in multiple locations. Your service provider keeps records, and cloud backups create additional copies of your digital activity. But the digital forensics breakthrough wasn't limited to phone records. Financial analysts working in coordination with the digital team had uncovered a series of suspicious transactions from Daniel's bank accounts. In the days leading up to the disappearance, there were several larger-than-normal deposits, followed by equally mysterious withdrawals. When compared against Daniel's typical financial behavior patterns, these transactions stood out as significant anomalies. The timing of these financial movements was particularly suspicious. They occurred during the exact time period when the deleted communications were most frequent. This correlation suggested a level of financial activity that might have been connected to the suspicious digital communications. Forensic accountants familiar with cases involving cover-ups noted that the pattern of deposits and withdrawals was consistent with someone making payments for services that needed to be kept off the official record. The amounts weren't enormous. They were carefully calculated to avoid triggering automatic banking alerts while still being substantial enough to secure whatever services were being purchased. Perhaps most damning was the metadata analysis of Daniel's device activity. Metadata is the digital information that describes other data. It tells investigators not just what was communicated, but when, where, and how communications took place. The metadata revealed that Daniel had been deleting messages not in the immediate aftermath of the disappearance, but systematically over the course of several weeks. This wasn't panic deletion. This was methodical evidence destruction carried out over an extended period. Even more troubling, the location data embedded in his device showed movement patterns that didn't align with his stated activities during the search period. While he claimed to be participating in search efforts or cooperating with investigators, his phone's GPS data indicated trips to locations that he had never mentioned to authorities. The forensic analysis also revealed something that would become central to the cover-up allegations: evidence that Daniel had researched digital privacy techniques and evidence destruction methods using his devices. Browser history showed searches for information about how long deleted data remains recoverable, how to permanently delete text messages, and how digital forensics investigations work. This research activity had occurred not after the disappearance, but in the weeks leading up to it. This timing suggested premeditation rather than reactive damage control. Advanced telecommunications analysis revealed another layer of the deception. Daniel's device had been configured to use encrypted messaging applications that don't store data on traditional phone networks. While the use of such applications isn't inherently suspicious, the timing of their installation and the deletion of the applications immediately after the disappearance raised significant red flags. The digital forensics team also discovered evidence of coordination between Daniel's device and other devices that investigators eventually linked to Malehya's associates. The pattern of communications suggested a level of coordination that extended beyond the immediate family unit. What emerged from this digital analysis was a picture of sophisticated deception involving multiple parties, financial transactions, and deliberate evidence destruction. This wasn't the digital footprint of a panicked stepfather trying to help find missing children. This was the digital signature of someone engaged in an elaborate cover-up operation. The breakthrough came when analysts were able to correlate the digital evidence with the physical evidence that had been recovered during the searches. The timing of certain deleted communications matched exactly with the discovery of key pieces of physical evidence, suggesting that Daniel had knowledge of where evidence would be found before the official search teams located it. This correlation between digital and physical evidence would prove crucial in building the case for deliberate obstruction of justice and potential involvement in whatever had happened to Lilly and Jack Sullivan. The digital forensics analysis had transformed Daniel Martel from a cooperative witness into the prime suspect in an elaborate cover-up. But the question remained: what exactly was he covering up, and how far did the deception extend? The piece of evidence that would ultimately tie together all the digital forensics discoveries was both heartbreaking and damning. A fragment of 6-year-old Lilly Sullivan's blanket, discovered in circumstances that would raise more questions than it answered. When Daniel Martel publicly revealed that this piece of Lilly's blanket had been recovered early in the search, his announcement was initially seen as a potential breakthrough. Finally, there was physical evidence that might provide clues about what had happened to the children. But as forensic specialists began their analysis of this evidence, a disturbing pattern emerged that would support the growing allegations of deliberate cover-up. The location where the blanket fragment was found immediately raised red flags for experienced crime scene investigators. It had been discovered in what appeared to be an inconspicuous section of the family property, not along any obvious path the children might have taken, not in an area where they would likely play or explore, but in a location that seemed almost deliberately obscured. Daniel's explanation for the blanket's location was carefully constructed. He claimed it was consistent with accidental misplacement during routine household activities. Perhaps the children had been playing with the blanket outside and it had become caught on vegetation. Perhaps it had been dropped during some innocent outdoor activity. But forensic fabric specialists who examined the blanket fragment told a very different story. The first anomaly was the condition of the fabric itself. Despite being allegedly exposed to outdoor conditions for an extended period, the blanket showed patterns of wear and degradation that were inconsistent with natural weathering. The fibers had been exposed to substances that don't occur naturally in the Nova Scotia wilderness. More significantly, the tear patterns in the fabric were not consistent with accidental damage. Fabric experts could demonstrate that the tears showed evidence of deliberate cutting or tearing, rather than the irregular damage that would result from being caught on branches or dragged across rough terrain. The soil composition analysis provided perhaps the most damning evidence. The dirt and organic matter embedded in the blanket fibers contained trace elements that were not consistent with the immediate area where the blanket was discovered. Chemical analysis suggested that the blanket had been in contact with soil from a different location, soil that contained mineral compositions not found near the Sullivan property. This evidence suggested that the blanket had been moved from its original location and deliberately placed where searchers would eventually find it. But the sophistication of this placement was what made investigators certain they were dealing with a calculated deception. The blanket fragment had been positioned in an area that would not be discovered by casual searchers or volunteer searchers, but would eventually be found by more systematic professional search teams. This level of planning suggested someone with knowledge of how search operations work and how evidence discovery processes unfold. Even more troubling was the timing of the blanket's discovery in relation to the digital evidence that had been recovered from Daniel's devices. The deleted communications from his phone showed activity that corresponded exactly with the time period when the blanket would have been moved and placed. Forensic analysts were able to demonstrate that Daniel's device had been in the vicinity of the blanket's discovery location during a time period when he had claimed to be elsewhere. The GPS metadata from his phone contradicted his stated activities and placed him at the scene during the crucial time window. Here's what makes this evidence so crucial to understanding modern criminal investigations. Physical evidence and digital evidence don't exist in isolation anymore. Today's forensic specialists can cross-reference physical findings with digital footprints to create a comprehensive timeline that's almost impossible to fabricate or manipulate. The analysis of the blanket also revealed biological traces that would become central to the investigation. While the details of this biological evidence have not been fully disclosed by investigators, sources familiar with the analysis have indicated that the traces were inconsistent with the children having simply been playing with the blanket outdoors. Perhaps most significantly, the forensic analysis revealed that the blanket fragment was not the complete piece of fabric that had originally been part of Lilly's bedding. Chemical analysis and fiber matching indicated that other portions of the blanket existed, but had not been recovered. This discovery raised the terrifying possibility that the blanket fragment was intended as a diversion, a piece of evidence designed to support the narrative that the children had wandered outdoors, while other, more incriminating evidence remained hidden. The sophisticated nature of this evidence manipulation became clear when investigators realized that the blanket's placement required knowledge of forensic investigation procedures. The location was chosen to ensure eventual discovery while avoiding immediate detection. The condition of the fabric was consistent with someone who understood how forensic analysts would interpret weathering and damage patterns. This level of sophistication suggested that Daniel's cooperation with the investigation wasn't the helpful assistance it appeared to be. It was an opportunity to gather intelligence about investigative procedures and search patterns that could then be used to manipulate evidence placement. The correlation between the blanket evidence and Daniel's digital footprint created a compelling narrative of deliberate deception. His deleted communications, his unexplained financial transactions, his device's location data, and the sophisticated manipulation of physical evidence all pointed toward a coordinated effort to control the investigation's direction. But perhaps most heartbreaking was what the blanket evidence suggested about Lilly and Jack's fate. If their stepfather was manipulating evidence related to their disappearance, if he was coordinating with others to control the investigation's findings, then the children's disappearance was not the tragic accident it had initially appeared to be. The blanket fragment that should have provided hope for finding the children alive had instead become evidence of a cover-up so elaborate and calculated that it challenged investigators' assumptions about family-based crimes. This wasn't a panicked attempt to hide an accident. This was sophisticated evidence manipulation carried out over an extended period by someone with detailed knowledge of investigative procedures. The digital and physical evidence were now telling the same story. Daniel Martel was not the cooperative stepfather he appeared to be. He was someone engaged in an elaborate deception designed to protect himself and potentially Malehya Brooks Murray from consequences related to whatever had really happened to Lilly and Jack Sullivan. To understand how this elaborate cover-up could have been orchestrated, we need to examine the psychological profiles of the two people at its center, Daniel Martel and Malehya Brooks Murray. What investigators discovered about their personalities, their relationship dynamics, and their individual motivations reveals crucial insights about how modern deception operates within intimate relationships. Daniel Martel's profile emerged as that of a man whose outward calm and methodical precision masked a deep need for control. Born in Halifax in 1982, Daniel had built his adult life around structure, predictability, and the management of information. His business background had taught him the value of controlling narratives and managing public perception. But this need for control extended far beyond his professional life. Friends and acquaintances noted that Daniel insisted on managing household finances, controlling social interactions, and maintaining absolute authority over family communications with the outside world. This level of control is often associated with individuals who have difficulty accepting situations they cannot manipulate or manage. When the children disappeared, Daniel's response wasn't the emotional breakdown that most people would expect from a loving stepfather. Instead, he approached the crisis like a business problem to be managed. His cooperation with investigators was methodical and strategic rather than emotional and desperate. The polygraph test that Daniel underwent reveals crucial insights into his psychological state. While polygraph results are not admissible in court and can be influenced by various factors, behavioral analysts noted that Daniel's responses during the test showed patterns consistent with someone who was managing his emotional responses rather than experiencing them naturally. More significantly, digital analysts discovered that Daniel had researched polygraph procedures and countermeasures in the weeks before taking the test. This preparation suggests someone who was treating the investigation as an adversarial process rather than a collaborative effort to find missing children. Daniel's financial transactions during the crucial period reveal another aspect of his psychology: the belief that problems can be solved through careful resource management. The pattern of deposits and withdrawals suggests someone who was purchasing services or assistance to manage the crisis, rather than someone who was simply cooperating with official efforts. Here's a crucial life lesson about relationship red flags. When someone in your life insists on controlling all information flow, manages all communication with outside parties, and treats emotional crises as problems to be strategically managed, rather than experiences to be shared, these are warning signs of potentially dangerous controlling behavior. Malehya Brooks Murray's psychological profile presents a different but equally troubling picture. Born in Truro in 1987, Malehya had experienced personal struggles that made her vulnerable to controlling relationships. Her creative nature and deep empathy were genuine, but they were combined with a tendency towards social isolation and financial dependence that made her reliant on Daniel's support. The relationship between Daniel and Malehya exhibited classic patterns of what psychologists call trauma bonding. an intense emotional connection forged through shared stress, secrecy, and mutual dependence. This type of relationship can create loyalty that overrides moral judgment and legal obligations. Community members observed that Malehya's decision-making had become increasingly influenced by Daniel's guidance. What might have appeared as a supportive partnership was actually a relationship dynamic where one person's judgment had become subordinated to the other's control. During the investigation, Malehya's behavior showed signs of someone caught between loyalty to Daniel and awareness that their shared situation was becoming increasingly dangerous. Her social media activity during this period revealed someone who was sending coded messages to her support network while maintaining public silence. The abrupt change in her relationship status on social media, which many observers found inappropriately timed, was actually consistent with someone who was trying to signal distress while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. This behavior suggests that Malehya may have been aware that her situation was becoming precarious, but felt unable to directly seek help. Anonymous sources close to Malehya have indicated that she had expressed concerns about Daniel's behavior in private conversations, but had been convinced that remaining loyal to him was the best way to protect herself and potentially the children. This dynamic is common in controlling relationships where the controlled person comes to believe that their safety depends on maintaining the controller's approval. The psychology of their relationship explains how the cover-up could have been maintained over an extended period. Daniel's need for control combined with Malehya's learned dependence created a dynamic where she became complicit in activities that she might not have initiated independently. But perhaps most troubling is what their psychological profiles suggest about their capacity for harming the children. Neither Daniel nor Malehya fits the profile of someone who would intentionally harm children out of malice. However, both profiles are consistent with individuals who might harm children as a result of other psychological pressures and then engage in elaborate cover-ups to protect themselves from consequences. The relationship between trauma, control, and deception in intimate partnerships creates conditions where normal moral boundaries can become distorted. People who would never consider harming children under normal circumstances might make terrible decisions when they're operating under extreme stress within controlling relationships. Understanding these psychological dynamics doesn't excuse the behavior, but it helps explain how two people could become involved in such an elaborate deception. The cover-up wasn't just about hiding evidence. It was about maintaining a relationship dynamic that had become central to both participants' psychological stability. The digital evidence of their coordination suggests that the cover-up became a shared project that reinforced their emotional bond while isolating them further from outside support systems. This psychological isolation made it easier to justify increasingly extreme actions in service of protecting their shared secret. What emerges from this psychological analysis is a picture of two people whose individual vulnerabilities combine to create a relationship dynamic capable of terrible things. Daniel's need for control and Malehya's learned dependence created conditions where protecting their relationship became more important than protecting the children who depended on them. This psychological framework explains not just how the cover-up was possible, but why it was sustained over such an extended period despite mounting evidence and increasing investigative pressure. The Sullivan case has created ripple effects that extend far beyond Nova Scotia, challenging fundamental assumptions about family-based investigations, digital privacy, and community responsibility. The revelations about Daniel's sophisticated cover-up and the failure of traditional investigative methods to initially detect his deception have prompted serious discussions about how modern technology has changed the nature of criminal investigation. For law enforcement agencies across Canada and internationally, the Sullivan case has become a crucial learning opportunity. The sophisticated nature of the digital deception demonstrated that traditional investigative approaches, interviewing witnesses, conducting searches, analyzing physical evidence, are no longer sufficient for complex cases involving tech-savvy suspects. The case has highlighted the critical importance of immediate digital evidence preservation. The delays in conducting comprehensive digital forensics analysis allowed Daniel time to systematically delete evidence over several weeks. Had investigators immediately secured and analyzed his digital devices, the cover-up might have been detected much earlier in the investigation. This has led to policy changes in how missing children cases are handled. Many jurisdictions now mandate immediate seizure and analysis of all digital devices belonging to family members. regardless of their apparent cooperation with the investigation. The Sullivan case proved that cooperative behavior can mask the most sophisticated deceptions. The financial forensics aspect of the case has also prompted changes in investigative procedures. The pattern of unusual transactions that Daniel used to potentially fund cover-up activities was only detected through sophisticated financial analysis. Many law enforcement agencies now integrate financial forensics specialists into missing persons investigations from the very beginning. Here's a crucial question for all of us to consider. How do we balance privacy rights with investigative needs? Should law enforcement have immediate access to our digital devices when family members go missing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because this case raises fundamental questions about digital privacy in the modern age. The community response to the Sullivan case reveals both the strengths and vulnerabilities of rural communities. The massive volunteer search effort demonstrated the power of community solidarity and shared responsibility for protecting children. However, the case also showed how community trust can be exploited by those engaged in deception. The isolation that characterizes many rural communities can create conditions where concerning family dynamics develop without outside oversight. The Sullivan case has prompted discussions about how communities can maintain appropriate oversight of family welfare without becoming intrusive or violating privacy boundaries. Social service agencies have also learned crucial lessons from the case. The early concerns about the children's developmental progress and living conditions were documented, but not adequately followed up. The case has highlighted the need for more intensive monitoring of families where child welfare concerns have been identified. The media's role in the Sullivan case has been both helpful and problematic. Intense media coverage kept public attention focused on the search for the children and helped maintain pressure for thorough investigation. However, the media attention also created additional stress for everyone involved and may have influenced some behaviors. Independent investigative journalism played a crucial role in uncovering details that might have remained hidden. The documentary series and detailed investigative reports that challenged official narratives helped maintain public pressure for accountability. This demonstrates the important role that independent media can play in ensuring thorough investigation of complex cases. The case has also raised important questions about digital literacy and awareness. Many people are unaware of how much information their digital devices collect and store, or how sophisticated digital forensics has become. The Sullivan case serves as a reminder that digital privacy requires active management, and that digital evidence can be recovered even when users believe they have deleted it permanently. For families and communities, the case provides important lessons about recognizing and responding to concerning relationship dynamics. The warning signs of controlling behavior, social isolation, and unusual secrecy were present in the Sullivan household, but were not adequately addressed by community members or support systems. The case emphasizes the importance of maintaining connections with isolated families and creating support systems that make it easier for people in controlling relationships to seek help. Community members who noticed concerning behaviors felt uncertain about how to respond appropriately, a common problem that requires better education and support systems. Educational institutions have also taken lessons from the case. Schools are often the primary point of contact between isolated families and the broader community. The developmental concerns that were noted about Lilly and Jack should have triggered more intensive family support services, not just documentation of problems. The legal implications of the case continue to unfold. The sophisticated nature of the alleged cover-up has challenged traditional legal frameworks for prosecution. The case may establish important precedents for how digital evidence is used in family-based criminal cases, and how obstruction of justice charges are applied in missing persons investigations. Perhaps most importantly, the Sullivan case serves as a stark reminder that child protection is a community responsibility that requires vigilance, courage, and sophisticated understanding of modern deception techniques. The children who suffer when these systems fail deserve better from all of us. The case demonstrates that protecting children in the digital age requires not just traditional community oversight, but also understanding of how technology can be used to hide abuse, manipulate evidence, and deceive investigators. We all need to become more sophisticated in recognizing these patterns and responding appropriately when we encounter them. As we close, I want you to think about this. What would you do if you suspected someone in your community was engaged in the kind of sophisticated deception we've seen in the Sullivan case? How would you balance respect for privacy with concern for child welfare? These aren't easy questions, but they're ones we all need to consider as we work to create safer communities for all children. As I finish writing this investigation, Lilly and Jack Sullivan remain missing. Their faces still appear on missing children websites. Their case remains open. The search for truth about what happened to them continues, driven now not just by law enforcement, but by a community that refuses to accept that two innocent children can simply vanish without accountability. The evidence we've examined today, the deleted digital communications, the suspicious financial transactions, the manipulated physical evidence, the psychological profiles of deception, paints a disturbing picture of how modern technology can be weaponized to hide terrible truths. But it also demonstrates how that same technology can ultimately expose the most sophisticated lies. Daniel Martel's elaborate cover-up, designed to protect himself and Malehya Brooks Murray from consequences, has instead created a digital trail of evidence that may ultimately lead to justice for Lilly and Jack. Every deleted message that was recovered, every suspicious transaction that was traced, every GPS coordinate that contradicted his statements has contributed to a comprehensive case file that continues to grow. The life lessons from this case are profound and urgent. In our digital age, your phone, your computer, your financial records create an unalterable record of your life. This technology can protect the innocent and expose the guilty, but only if we understand how it is and ensure it's used effectively by investigators. We've learned that isolation can hide the most dangerous family dynamics, that controlling relationships can escalate into tragedy, and that community vigilance is more important than ever in protecting vulnerable children. We've seen how sophisticated deception can masquerade as cooperation, and how the people who seem most helpful to investigators may actually be the most dangerous. The case has changed how law enforcement approaches missing children investigations, how communities monitor family welfare, and how digital evidence is preserved and analyzed. These changes may prevent future tragedies, but they came at a terrible cost: the disappearance of two beautiful children whose fate remains unknown. Before you go, I need you to do 3 things. First, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Cases like this require months of research and investigation, and your support helps me continue bringing you these deep dives that mainstream media won't touch. Second, share this video. The more people who understand how modern deception works, the better equipped we all are to protect children in our communities. And third, never forget Lilly and Jack Sullivan. Keep their faces in your memory. If you ever see them, if you ever have information about their case, contact the Royal Canadian Mounted Police immediately. The digital evidence may have exposed Daniel Martel's deception, but it hasn't yet brought Lilly and Jack home. That's still our responsibility, as a community, as a society, as people who believe that children deserve protection and that truth ultimately matters more than any cover-up, no matter how sophisticated. The search for Lilly and Jack Sullivan continues. The demand for accountability continues, and the fight to ensure that no other family can use modern technology to hide such terrible secrets continues as well. This case reminds us that in the digital age, there are no perfect crimes, only crimes that haven't been fully investigated yet. Daniel Martel's deleted messages were recovered, his financial transactions were traced, his GPS coordinates were mapped. The blanket evidence was analyzed, the psychological profile was constructed. Technology exposed his deception, but human courage and determination will ultimately deliver justice for Lilly and Jack Sullivan. Until that day comes, their story serves as both a warning and a call to action for all of us who believe that protecting children is our most sacred responsibility. The truth is still out there, hidden in digital footprints and physical evidence that continues to be analyzed. And somewhere, 2 children who should be playing and laughing and growing up are counting on all of us to never stop searching for that truth, no matter how deeply it's been buried or how sophisticated the lies designed to hide it. Justice for Lilly and Jack Sullivan isn't just about solving one case. It's about proving that in our connected world, the truth will ultimately prevail over even the most elaborate deceptions. That's a lesson worth fighting for, and it's why their story will continue to be told until they finally come home.